Hey, 3DMJers, this is Coach Brad Loomis bringing you a special podcast exclusively for our YouTube viewers. Today I am joined by Team 3DMJ female physique competitor Katina DeJarnett. Katina is going through her first prep and it's been my honor to coach her. Katina and I got together for this podcast as a special assignment for a media class that she is taking in college, and I was lucky enough to be the source of her interview. It turned out so well that I had to keep it, and she was kind enough to let me do so. The podcast was targeted to a small class that is not that familiar with strength and physique sports. So if you are just learning about natural powerlifting and bodybuilding, then this will be perfect for you. We talk about balancing life and training for these sports, as well as the post-competition blues that sometimes hits athletes after months and months of training for an event, and now it's over. We talk about why we choose to go drug-free in these sports. Also, with respect to the actual competition of powerlifting versus bodybuilding, which is most rewarding. Katina can be found on Katina Lifts Kilos on Instagram, and she will be competing in the women's physique category at the NPC Empire Classic on April 13th, 2019. So as of today's date, that's this weekend. Hope you enjoy our conversation, and once again, thank you to Katina for considering me to be interviewed for this project.
All right. Hey, Coach, thank you for your time today. I wanted to ask you a few questions to help my audience get to know you a bit better.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you for having me on, Katina. I appreciate it. I'm honored.
Awesome. So we'll get started with a easy question. What was the initial driving force behind your desire to try a bodybuilding show?
Like most things, it was a long evolution. And just for the interest of saving time and not giving you guys the whole long and drawn out backstory, essentially what it came down to is I have a very addictive personality, and I wanted to have a healthy outlet. And so there was all of this background that wanted me to become, very healthy. I started training, taking nutrition seriously. I opened up my own gym, my own facility, open for business, had about probably 100 or so members. And I'm a competitive person and I have an addictive personality. And so I needed a good, healthy outlet to I don't know, to serve that person in me. And it was in perfect line because it was in my line of business. Here I was operating a gym, right? I needed some sort of way of marketing that at least made sense. So it was kind of like, Brad's a professional natural bodybuilder. He knows what he's doing. We should go to him, So it was kind of self-marketing in a way. And again, I just needed something for a competitive outlet. And that was the initial driving force to do a bodybuilding show. And on top of that, I love the dedication and the journey. This was way before your guys' time, Katina, but there's this movie in the 70s called Rocky. I'm sure you've probably heard of it.
Of course.
I probably watched the first Rocky about 13,000 times. And I loved it. That whole end of the movie where he's going through all of his training, I just fell in love with. And I wanted to do it. I wanted something to where I could do that same thing. You know what I mean? To have that kind of dedication and go through that journey. And obviously I'm not going to be a professional boxer, nor ever going to be an NFL player or anything like that. And natural bodybuilding was kind of what I was interested in that time. And I was like, you know what? I am doing this. So that was the initial push to do a bodybuilding show.
That's awesome. And that is a really good amount of info. And I hope that people have seen Rocky because classic, absolutely classic.
Yeah.
So to further build on the last question, was it easy to stay natural or make the choice to stay natural as a bodybuilder when it tends to be a sport full of enhanced athletes?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Especially at that particular time. So if you think about the context, this was like the early 2000s, right?
Hmm.
And, there was not a lot of, it wasn't well known that bodybuilders took steroids, right? It was kind of still on the hush hush. It was still kind of on the back burner. So a lot of people were just under the impression that these guys, they just got that way, and with all that being said, there was a glimpse of the inlet of natural bodybuilding, and so I went through all of the avenues of doing a bodybuilding show that a particular person would go through, looking at the NPC and looking at all these non drug tested federations, and then lo and behold, I find a natural bodybuilding organization, an actual natural bodybuilding organization. And I was like, you know what, this is perfect because I don't even know how to take drugs to begin with, the right dosing and everything like that. Plus, at the time, I was 30 something years old. I was 30, I don't know, 33, 34 years old. I had a kid. And
Hmm.
so it was very easy for me to do natural bodybuilding because I'm not going to jeopardize my business, nor set an example for my child that I'm going to be taking these drugs because I'm not going to judge. It's not there. There is no judgment on my part. But that being said, it's still illegal,
Right.
and you cannot get those legally without a prescription. Well, I'm not going to do anything illegal. I'm an adult. I'm a business owner. I'm a father. There is no way I'm going to jeopardize that for the sake of, competing unnaturally.
All right. Yeah, it's crazy to me. It's such a big decision when folks do head the opposite route. So I think it's
Hmm.
really great that you're sharing this sort of insight because I think it can be tempting, especially in the world of college sports. So yeah,
Oh,
that's
for
great.
for sure. Especially when you can magnify your efforts by a jillion times, right? That is awfully tempting, And if I was in if I moved my decision, like let's say that we took the 33, 34-year old Brad and then bumped him into today's age, I
Hmm.
don't know if I would have had the same mindset, So
Right.
can't say for
Right.
sure. Can't say that it would be as easy.
It seems like it's a little bit more accepted these days as opposed to taboo. So I mean, I can see where it would be, but I agree with you 100%. I totally respect your decision to stay natural. That's awesome. And that's why I use y'all's business for the coaching too, because there's something to be said for that extra drive and kick of using your own chutzpah, as it were, to
Yeah.
to drive your progress.
It tests your mind because you've got to find ways to keep your metabolic rate going, to keep
Hmm.
your hormones going. You can't just say, okay, let's just up the dose of this drug or that drug and it'll take care of it. You have to, you got to think, you know.
Right. Right. Purposeful twitching. But we'll move
Mhm.
on. So, following on from that, as an accomplished power lifter as well as a bodybuilder, which competitions do you find to be the most rewarding?
Um, that's a multifaceted question because when you talk about the competition itself, I like the competition side of powerlifting better because
Okay.
it's strictly a competition, right? In bodybuilding, it's a subjective sport, and so you put in all this effort, you get up there on stage, and then you hope for the best because at that point you're not in control of your placing at all. It's strictly in the hands of a panel of judges as to far as like that person looks better than that person, right? And so it's almost not even a competition. It's almost kind of like I don't know, a beauty pageant, or one of those 4-H shows where they're like, that pig is better than that pig. Um, Whereas the powerlifting, you actually do have a little bit of control of your placing and the actual competitive aspect of it. I remember the very first national bodybuilding show that I did, I had a choice when it came down to the deadlifts. So, like for those listeners in powerlifting, you've got 3 events. You start with the squat, then you move to the bench press, and then lastly, you do the deadlift. And you get 3 attempts at each of those lifts. And so it came down to my last attempt, my deadlift. I had a choice. I could basically go for what I knew I could get, a PR, a personal record, keep in mind, but I could go for what I knew I could get and settle for the silver medal. Or I could just go ham, just go for it, go for something that I needed a perfect lift and win the gold. And that was a very, very unique spot for me, being a bodybuilder all of the previous years and not having control over my placing. You know what I mean? We were kind of watching things the whole time as we're going through the other events. I'm keeping myself close. And it was like, okay, I can go for something I know I can get. I know I can get 535 pounds on this deadlift. It'll be a PR. I can settle for that, or I can try 550 and go for the gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And off topic from that, I decided I wanted the PR. For me, it was a competition against me. I'd never done 535 before. And for me, I would have rather have gotten 535 and settled for the silver than go for something that maybe I didn't get. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I wasn't sure I could get 5, and so I wanted that accomplishment for me to get that PR. So the competitive aspect of it, powerlifting, I love much better. But your question, ironically, says rewarding, right?
Right.
You are going through this. You know how hard this is.
Yep.
I've had ex-Navy SEALs say that prepping for a bodybuilding show to get to elite essential levels of body fat is harder than going through SEAL training.
Wow.
And SEAL training, they're trying to make you quit, you know. When you get on that bodybuilding stage, I don't know, it feels just a little bit more rewarding because of all the aspects of life that are almost kind of taken over. Whereas powerlifting, you don't got to starve. You don't have to deprive yourself and go through all the emotions of all of that, aspect that where it kind of takes over your life. And so, yeah, the competitions for bodybuilding are kind of a little bit, I've never cried on the powerlifting platform. I've passed out, I've darn near thrown up, but I've never cried. And I can honestly say that in my last bodybuilding competition, my last professional appearance, when I was doing my individual routine and I got to a certain aspect of the music as I was choreographing my routine, I almost felt like crying. I was like this far from it because it was like, wow, this is the culmination of all those months of sacrifice and hard work.
Yeah, that's incredible. That emotional crescendo. I am very eager to experience it. Uh, that brings me to like a kind of a follow-up question almost is there that same kind of anticipatory buildup prior to a powerlifting competition where you're kind of getting hyped and then the nerves kick in and then kind of afterward you have that loss of the high of competing after powerlifting? Is that similar to like a bodybuilding prep for you?
Well, that's a good question. I've never even thought about that before, Katina, to be honest with you. Because after bodybuilding, yes. And this is something I know that, I'm going to have the pleasure of helping you through is that what now syndrome. That's what I call it, is the what now syndrome. Because, it's one of those things where you've worked so hard to attain this, absolutely tremendous body that it's like almost a dream for most folks. And it's
Right.
really not that healthy. You don't want to live that way. You're fragile. You look great, but a stiff wind would blow you away. So you went through all of that work and now you have to kind of lose it, in order to be healthy again. And that very does leave this empty nest syndrome of what now. And I can't say that ever happened with powerlifting. Because with powerlifting, it's like, okay, nationals is over. It's time to get ready for the Pan Am Games or Worlds or whatever. You get done with your qualifier. Okay, I've qualified. Now let's get ready for nationals. And even after like a world event or a kind of a Pan Am Games, it's like, okay, we got to get ready for the next year. We got to get ready for next year when we compete in the qualifier and the regional and et cetera, et cetera. So you're always looking to that next thing, and it's kind of like it's a continuous sport in a way. So yeah, that's a good question. I never really thought about that, and they are very different in that manner.
Right. Yeah. So barring injury, really, it seems like powerlifting, you kind of always have this carrot to chase, really,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, I guess, if you think of bodybuilding, I mean, yes, you do have that cyclical cycle of lose weight, gain weight, lose weight, gain weight between competitions, but I guess there's a lot more time, there's a lot more off season, it seems like, than powerlifting in like a federation or USAPL. Yeah, that carrot is always there.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right with bodybuilding. It's such a it's all spread out, because you certainly don't want to, or at least it's not advised that you compete and go through that trauma every single year. You know what I mean? And so yeah, right there off the bat, it's like, well, why should I really even train right now? I'm not going to be competing for another couple of years, maybe 3 years. I'm not even going to start dieting for another 2.5 years, or I can get away with this right now. And some people lose their drive, when they're
Right.
in that what now state.
Mm. And we're all just a little bit crazy if we're bodybuilding, so you never know what'll happen. Take us from
I don't know
one
if it's
extreme to
over.
the other. But it makes it fun.
No, for
Um,
sure. Yeah.
well, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip on forward to an important question that I think is a little bit more direct to maybe benefiting the listeners here. And that's going to be, as a father, how do you balance your time between working, training for powerlifting, bodybuilding, and just spending time with your family in general? Because I know that can be really hard. And I know you take your faith very seriously as well, and I think that's something that the listeners here can identify with.
Well, I can honestly say I have not always been good at it. When my son was very young, he doesn't even really remember this. Thank goodness, because I'm not proud of it. But yeah, I kind of neglected my son a little bit. I was operating my own business, so I was down at the gym all the time, trying to promote business and training people, a lot of times training people for free. Um, and yeah, there wasn't that balance. So between that point there, when I was hardly ever home, I'd be home for an hour, maybe at most for a lunch break, and then I'd be home in the evening, and that was it. To now, you skip ahead essentially 16 years. First of all, I don't own my business anymore. I coach folks like yourself here at home, full time. And my gym is right back there, about 20, 30 feet. And so that's obviously conducive to spending time training for powerlifting and bodybuilding and doing the coaching and working and being at home to be a good husband, to, be a good dad. So obviously it's kind of almost like nirvana, in a way. So I've gone from here to here. So you can imagine there's all that in between, right? Where it was a slow evolution of getting to this point. But I can say that the good part about being a bodybuilder was that my son got to see the real life application of dedication and discipline in life. And so as we were growing up and he was developing himself as an athlete, he became more involved in my training and in my journey, right? And he's kind of developed his own journey because now he's a football player and he's very passionate about football. And football's kind of made him who he is. He's gone from a kind of a lazy kid that really didn't even know his multiplication, tables until he was about in the 7th or 8th grade, to now he's straight A and B student and hits the gym every single night doing his training. And so we've kind of come together in that aspect, you know what I mean, to where having him involved with me during that period of time is been part of that evolution of coming to this point to where we've kind of reached this nirvana about me myself being a competitive athlete, a coach, a dad, a husband, and then like you said, you know, now in this point in time, I feel like I'm like at the greatest inclusion of my faith and my relationship with God the Father than ever, because I've reached this point to where it's all come together in a way. You know, job is at home, training is at home. So then I get to start my day, you know, at church and then come home, you know, and very, very blessed, probably undeservedly so. You know, here this kind of selfish loser in a way has come to the point to where God has brought him to this level of, like I said, almost like family nirvana in a way, you know.
That's perfect. And with anything, it's like you progressed, you practiced, and you made it there, and you're there now. And I think you're one of the most deserving people of that nirvana. So I think you're doing really great things, really great things. And that bond that you've developed with your family and with God, building over time, like any muscle,
Mm.
that's awesome. That's good
Yeah.
training right there. That's life training.
Yeah, for sure. Because that's one thing that I do feel like God has given me a really good gift for. And that's kind of being a dad, being a coach. You know, I feel very able to coach anybody at anything that I am good at. And a lot of times I kind of look to you guys as my athletes, as kind of like my kids in a way. You know, I got to kind of, sometimes I got to put that tough love on you, you know, and other times I guide you, you know, and kind of let you guys take the rein. It's not that different from fatherhood in a way, you know. And then ultimately it kind of comes down to the point where it's like, okay, you know what, we said do this. Now it's up to you to do it. You know, just like God kind of lays on us. He says, here's my scripture, here's my commands, here's my words. You've got a choice. You can do it or you cannot. But, you know, ultimately that's your decision, and where it takes you is kind of up to you.
That is a great comparison. Wow. That was really good. That was deep. So, Brad, is there any closing or final wisdom you would like to leave the listeners with?
Boy, I don't think so. You know, that's a really good interview when there's nothing else to be said. It's just like you can drop the mic.
Well, that works. Well, from myself and the listeners, thank you so much for your time today, Brad. This has been really eye-opening, even though, I mean, I've obviously chatted with you before. We chat via email all the time, but this is great. That was really good insight.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed this special podcast. If you are new to us here at Team 3DMJ and want to check us out, go to www.3dmusclejourney.com. There you will find information on coaching, as well as tons of free content like podcasts and blogs. You will also find learning materials like the Muscle and Strength Pyramids and monthly applications in strength sports, or MASS. You can also find us at 3dmjvault.com, where you will find our online courses, like the Lifting Library, a guide to mastering the bodybuilding essentials. You can also find tons of free courses. Once again, you can get updates on new content delivered to you for free by signing up for our newsletter, once again at 3dmusclejourney.com.